As a dungeon master, there is so much you could focus on. Building a world to explore, engaging with character backstories, planning exciting encounters with combat, puzzles, and traps, and on and on and on. One of the things I love most about tabletop RPGs, however, is the opportunity to tell good stories. In this video, we'll cover some simple storytelling techniques for DMs that can lead to better games. Hi everyone, my name is Nate and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. Now I first want to give a quick word of caution about your story. In my opinion, the danger in using your power as Dungeon Master to tell a story is that you might overplan and write the story on your own. Some of this certainly comes down to playstyle, but I do recommend you adapt your story to player actions. Be flexible and empower them to be storytellers as well. All right, that out of the way, let's talk about our storytelling elements. First, conflict. This is the basic element that is necessary for any storyteller or game master, and it might seem like a no-brainer. But what I want to encourage you to do is to think beyond the conflict of a set of combat encounters, or even the conflict of the players and your campaign's villain plotting each other's demise. Rather, think about the ongoing conflicts in your game world that go beyond the player characters. Sure, most GMs like the PCs to be the stars of the campaign, but in order for your game world to feel like a living and breathing place with a story of its own, you need to infuse conflict into the game world. What sorts of tensions exist in this world? What wounds and scars has its history created? And what sort of vengeance might that imply? You don't need tons of conflicts, and in the beginning it's probably enough to start pretty small. Try to think of like 2 or 3 concerns of the residents of a certain region, for example. These are the sorts of things that can act as story hooks to get your players off on quests early on. But when running a large campaign, think of those bigger conflicts that will bring your world to life and make it feel believable. Also, you can help your players tie their character backstories in with some of these larger conflicts. Perhaps the fighter's grandfather was in the Elven Civil War that left a rift among the inhabitants of the wild forests of the East. Perhaps your cleric serves a deity that is misunderstood because of the misdeeds of some of its supposed followers over a century ago. Also remember, conflict doesn't have to mean war or other forms of violence between your world's inhabitants. Political struggles work, or even strange diseases or famines. So conflict is vital for your player characters, but also consider it for your world. It can create new stories you didn't foresee and increase your players' immersion. Before we get to our next storytelling element, a quick thank you to my sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil's amazing Game Master features allow for you to enter world notes as well as plot points, NPCs, campaign information, and much more. It's definitely helpful for GMs in terms of staying organized, but it can also be shared with your players, who can create accounts through heroes and manage their characters, take notes, chat, and write journals, creating an amazing RPG synergy for you and your group. Now, I'm not the only one who loves World Anvil. In fact, they were recently awarded a Gold Ennie for the best digital aid or accessory. These are the leading RPG industry awards that take place every year at Gen Con, so it's a huge honor and definitely validation that World Anvil is worth checking out. Go to worldanvil.com right now and sign up, or check out the link in the video description. Alright, let's talk about rising and falling action here. The normal flow of a story starts us out with exposition, in which we are given the details about the setting, the characters, and the context. Then at some point relatively soon we have an inciting incident or complication, something in the story that introduces the conflict or problem. The rising action continues the exploration of the central conflict, increasing the tension until we get to the climax. The climax is the highest point of tension, but eventually it is diffused, the heroes win, or get wiped out maybe, and we begin the falling action and enter resolution. This very traditional storytelling format works really well for an individual 3 or 4 hour RPG session, but for game masters running campaigns, there really should be some sort of natural rhythm of rising and falling action throughout. Some people might enjoy a 20-session blitz of hellfire and intense action where the tension never lets up, but in most games, for that tension to really have its maximum effect, We need breaks from it. Too much constant tension can actually overload us and we disengage. However, it's possible for us to provide some resolution and not let the action fall completely, still hinting at future conflict. The party defeated the band of raiders who were attacking the village, but what are these strange markings on their arms? We won! Let's celebrate! To the tavern! But those strange markings are haunting you even in the revelry. You see? The plot has thickened. Now, in terms of downtime, some people get turned off when they hear that word. So you could think of ways your downtime can continue the story if you don't like those breaks, but personally I think it's okay to let your player characters breathe for a bit. Personally, I love a good about town session from time to time after a perilous quest. Look at any fantasy novel featuring an epic journey. Lord of the Rings, Sword of Shannara, Wheel of Time. We have harrowing, life-threatening action, and then rest. The story needs it, and so does your game. This does not mean you need about town sessions if that's not your thing. But give your players a peaceful night camped by the river, a warm meal in their bellies, telling stories of their hometown, even as the peril of conflict looms. I think in a good RPG campaign, you'll usually have many small breaks in the tension, even before the overall climax of the campaign. Almost all good stories have this. The rising action is usually the meat of a good story, but find ways to break the tension and let the falling action occur from time to time too. Our third storytelling technique is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a literary technique in which the storyteller hints at future events. When used in your game, it should pique your player's curiosity. It should make them ask, what was up with that? Or does that mean something? Then when you deliver on what you've foreshadowed, there's usually a sense of satisfaction. A few examples here. Perhaps there's an NPC the characters interact with early on who's just a little bit off. Something they say comes out wrong and they quickly correct themselves. Now you've given a hint of things to come, and you can bring this person back later to do something terrible. Or maybe you've hinted at some future greatness, and later in the story you can deliver on that. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. It also doesn't have to be based on anything this actual character says or does that can tell us something about their future. What if your player characters witness a girl's coming-of-age ceremony at the local Temple of Gefion? The girl will become a woman, and as is tradition in this village, she will aid in the temple rituals for the next year of her life. As the priest approaches the girl to draw the seal of the goddess in mud on her forehead, his eyes grow wide. He clutches his chest and falls, dead. I don't even want to imagine what that foreshadows, but it's not good. A couple other ideas. Try a key phrase that recurs from time to time throughout your campaign, or an event that recurs. An old proverb that multiple NPCs repeat. That's odd. Could it be related to our quest? I use these a lot in my game. Or you can make it a little more serious by putting the player characters in touch with an ancient prophecy. They're in the tavern and a strange bard repeats the prophecy in a haunting poem. Slowly some of these events start to occur, and the player characters are a vital part. This can be used on the campaign level stretched out over several sessions, or this could all occur and you could deliver on your foreshadowing in one session. In an RPG, the foreshadowing should be memorable, notable. Depending on your group and their level of engagement with the story, you may have to hit them in the face with it. As an example, some of the little bits of foreshadowing in the character dialogue I remember discussing when we studied Romeo and Juliet when I was in high school might not be enough at most game tables. While I wouldn't exactly call Shakespeare subtle, these little dialogue bits don't always play well for a live audience, especially when Stacy is looking up that new spell or ability and Brian is checking out Tristan's new color-changing dice. So know your group and know how loud your foreshadowing will have to be for them to notice or appreciate it. Our fourth technique is in media res. This one is one of my favorite techniques, and I've definitely talked about it before. But it needs re-emphasizing at least once every 10 3/4 months, or we are likely to forget its power. In media res means we are starting in the middle. We don't get the once upon a time exposition. We start as characters have already been doing something. Movies use this technique all the time. So for your RPG, perhaps your game starts as the characters are on the road, on their way to a quest they have already accepted. And now they are attacked, ambushed. That's where the game begins. Once you have your campaign going, it's really easy to open a game session in media res. I generally use a kind of fast forward technique where I skip some things. I'll end a session where they've just completed a quest in the Obsidian Temple, let's say. And now I'll start the next session by saying, it's been 5 days since you returned from the Obsidian Temple. You find yourselves lounging in the tavern. It works great to keep the story moving. But with in media res, we can fast forward a bit and we can start in the middle of some action. Like this. 5 days have passed since your return from the Obsidian Temple. It's late, and the four of you stumble out of the tavern on your way back to your base of operations. A cry pierces the night air. Ah! A flaming arrow streaks over your heads and a nearby roof lights up in flame. More cries. We're under attack, you hear from a nearby guard on the wall. More arrows. What do you do? So earlier I talked about exposition, and a good story needs it. But sometimes it can be done poorly. We're treated to 5 or 10 minutes of background information and history when really we just want to get into the action. So firstly, I think we can actually give out some necessary information in an action-packed scene with in media res. If you do it well, your rich descriptions of action can impart valuable information about the setting, location, cultures, and types of creatures. Another option is to use in media res to launch your players into the action and delay any necessary exposition for a little while. In an RPG, there's going to be plenty of time for exposition. What's the rush? Grab your players' attention and start strong with in media res. If it's the start of a new campaign, you'll probably want to get to some exposition sometime relatively soon. But in an ongoing campaign, it can easily wait until later. Our last technique for this video, the plot twist. These are so much fun, and for me it's hard not to overuse them. Overuse really is a danger here. If there's always a twist, it becomes formulaic and your players will just be waiting for it. And then it's not much of a plot twist anymore. It has to be unexpected to work. It doesn't have to be totally mind-blowing though. I think of movie endings like Fight Club or Shutter Island, and many others. Right? In many of my dungeons, I simply ask the question, what is it about this place that I can surprise my players with? How can I subvert their expectations, even a little bit, showing them that there's more to the situation than they thought? Just as with most of these techniques we've talked about, twists can be used in little ways and very big campaign-level narrative ways. Things like doppelgangers or the spell Disguise Self make for easy twists. This person is not who we thought they were. Now, that one is a bit overdone in my opinion, and you gotta be careful or your players will keep questioning whether every single NPC is really who they say they are. But here's some I've had fun with. The players have been hunting a dangerous druid, and when they find him, it turns out he's the uncle of one of my PCs. Or an ally the PCs relied on turns on them. Or the party finally catches the villain of the campaign, and she actually provides convincing evidence that she's done the right thing. Does this mean the king is actually wrong? Perhaps a magic item the PCs have been carrying with them is cursed, or a rusty old dagger the rogue has been carrying is actually an item of great power. Use these sorts of plot twists from time to time, and they can be a lot of fun for you and your players. Okay, them's the 5 techniques. I'll re-emphasize, don't go overboard in writing out huge stories apart from your group. Keep it flexible and know that some of the best stories are those that work with the character backstories and incorporate player choice at the table. As always, I would love to hear what you think below. Do you use these techniques? What other basic or advanced techniques do you rely on? And what general tips do you have for telling good stories that can make your game better? I would like to thank my patrons so much for their support. These are people who support WASD20 on a monthly basis. They're a huge help. I couldn't do it without them, and you too can join with them and get some pretty cool rewards like weekly live map drawing streams with yours truly and lots of other cool stuff. So go check it out at patreon.com/WASD20. Another way you can help support me is just by liking this video and hitting that subscribe button below. Having you subscribe really does make a difference in helping this channel level up, and I would greatly appreciate it. All right, that's all for this one, everybody. Take care. You'll see me again very soon.